Oh,
All right. This is the Domestic Draft
man.
Podcast. I'm Evan Bierman here with Dan Slowick. We have a special guest coming on a bit later to talk all things NBA draft. But first, Dan, what are you drinking, man?
It's summer. It's time to kind of change up the taste buds. I've been doing hazies and IPAs kind of for a long time now, but this is a Tiki Life for Me beer from Abnormal Brewing Company, out here in San Diego. It calls it a island cocktail, but it's really just kind of a wheat beer. It says, get your Hawaiian shirt and grass skirt ready. Tiki Life for Me is a wheat ale that draws inspiration from tiki cocktails. And let's go into Abnormal Brewing. I've seen their cans around. They're pretty kind of stripped down graphics, and it's more or less kind of their name and some like coloring. But it's a really interesting kind of place and interesting brewery. Started out as a winery. So Abnormal Wine Company was the initial idea here from the CEO and president, which is Matt Deloche. Back in like the early 2000s, he started like doing a little bit of making his own wine with his brother, started up Abnormal Winery, and then got some investors, got some opportunities, and opened up a space, expanded, success, right? He kind of has quoted as saying, it kind of got like kickstarted really, really fast. Everything started happening really fast. So he branched off from having a winery, then to a brewery, all in the same space. And then they opened up a restaurant as well. So this is up in Rancho Bernardo here in San Diego. It's like a suburb. And you can go to this place. It's called Craft and Cork. You could see the brewery operations. It's completely open concept. You could see the the fermentation tanks for the winery all in the same. And then you could order your food kind of while all this is going out. So they have a huge operation. It's a 10-barrel brew house, 440 barrels of fermentation capacity, all within this kind of complex in Rancho Bernardo. They opened up everything around like 2014. So it's not too old. It's rather a new concept. And the beer is really good. I mean, just in time for summer. I mean, summer has started. I know it's really, really hot out in Chicago right now. I got 2 weeks left of the school year, and then I'm on summer break. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And it's just the right flavor. I think the name can kind of give it away, Tiki Life for Me, and you know how this tastes before you even taste it. What about
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. It is hot. It's 95 right now, and it's later on in the day. It was feels like I think of 107 earlier on. So it is getting hot. So I grabbed myself a West Coast IPA from Miskatonic Brewing Company. Miskatonic's located in Darien, Illinois. Their tap room features seats at the bar that overlook the brew house and cellar. This hip, homey brewery is family friendly. You can bring your favorite board game along, despite their slightly scary beer names like Dungeon Master, which is a gelatinous cube, mind-boggling cinnamon mocha imperial milk stout. That's a lot. That's a mouthful right there. Or this beer that I have here, which is the West Coast Wizard IPA. It's 6.3%. Gets a 3.71 on Untappd. It's a classic West Coast IPA. It's light, malty with the classic dry finish. I actually picked this up at my favorite liquor store here in Logan Square. And speaking of Logan Square, my fellow Logan Square neighbor is here to join us to talk NBA. It's Ricky O'Donnell. He is the basketball writer and editor at SB Nation and co-host of the Cash Considerations podcast, the Chicago Bulls podcast. Ricky, thanks so much for joining us, man.
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get into it, man. Interested to see. I think you've been writing and covering basketball in a different form of capacity, whether it's high school, college, or NBA, for the last like 10 or so years. Correct me if I'm wrong. So how did that start? Where have you always been a basketball first fan? Has it always been kind of your passion to go into covering the basketball?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me I'm getting old, but that's true. I've been doing it for a long time, and I do not take it for granted. I feel incredibly fortunate to have been able to do it for as long as I have, and I hope to do it for as long as possible, because at this point, I don't really know like what else I can really do. I guess I got into it, I'm gonna say in college, like sophomore year of college, I started my own sports blog. That was 2007, and it was called Tremendous Upside Potential. And I was just writing about the Bears, the Bulls, and the White Sox, and making fun of the Cubs. And around that time, I also started interning at the Chicago Sun-Times, covering high school sports. I was mostly a web editor, but I was there for 3 years. And the last year, I was also covering high school games, lots of really good players around the city. I think I covered Jabari Parker when he was a freshman at Simeon. He was the first freshman to play on there. varsity team. I covered Ryan Boatwright, who you might remember from the Yukon national title team alongside Shabazz Napier. He was at East Aurora, I think. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door. And I was sort of doing my own thing and working at the Sun-Times. And then eventually the Sun-Times gig kind of petered out after I graduated college. I think I did it 1 year after that. So then I was just sort of, just writing TUP as I had been doing basically every day since 2007 and trying to find a way to somehow make a living doing it. And eventually somebody at SB Nation called me up and said that they had been reading my work and they wanted to know if I could do SB Nation Chicago, which was like a new regional sports site they were doing at the time. This was in like 2012 probably. And, SB Nation had all these new sites for all the major cities. I was running the Chicago site. Eventually, I was also doing like some news desk writing for like their national coverage. And then one day they asked me if I wanted to be an editor for the national coverage. So that was in 2012. I've been working there since like 2012 full time is my only job.
Nice.
I wasn't always full time. I think I actually became full time in maybe like 2015, but I was, it was enough to be my only job, or I was making it enough to be my only job. And I've been doing it since then. And yeah, I guess like when I first got into it, I mostly wrote about the Bears actually. I wrote about the Bears.
Okay.
So I like covered, Bears training camp. There was a story I did at SB Nation Chicago my first year there of like Jay Cutler sort of making fun of me at Bears training camp and staring me down when I tried to take a picture of him. So I would like do stuff like that.
Sounds like Jay Cutler.
Yeah. Yeah, great guy, Jay Cutler. So I would do just mostly stuff like that. And yeah, and then eventually, I guess when I got to SB Nation, they like slotted, since then like everything just became more like vertical. Like you picked a sport for the SB Nation national coverage and you were just doing that. So I sort of fell into basketball. And then one day, this is probably in like 2014 or 15. Yeah, I think 2014. It was the year Jabari was at Duke and Wiggins was at Kansas. Yeah. They just called me up and they're like, hey, we need someone to do college basketball. So you're doing college basketball now. And I did not know college basketball at all. Like I remember somebody asking, well, I knew like the NBA prospects and I followed it through that lens. But just in terms of like covering college basketball for your job, like I remember somebody mentioned to me something about Frank Haith at the time. I'm like, who the hell is Frank Haith? He was the Missouri coach. Like Missouri was really good. I should have probably known who he was. But the point is I sort of dove into it then and kind of made that my beat, going like mostly the pipeline going from high school, the top high school recruits into college, into the NBA, still cover the NBA draft to this day. I've been working on NBA draft coverage. For the last couple of weeks. I was doing it earlier today as well. And then writing about the Bulls still on the side too is the other thing I had been doing, like for the SB Nation Bulls site. So that's kind of how I got into it, and I've been super duper lucky in my career to be able to hold on to my spot there. And yeah, it's a blast. I'm lucky to do it.
Yeah. And I think most people who know you probably have stumbled upon your Twitter as like your kind of like entrance into your work. I know I follow you and your Twitter handles at SBN_Ricky. So go ahead and give him a follow. Your pinned tweet there is about like going to USA camp and seeing Zion as a high schooler, right? So I kind of want to talk about that experience and like, what was it like to be in the gym there at that high school USA basketball camp, and like how many pros, right? Because it was a couple of years ago. So like how many pros are now that you observed in that camp, and what was it just like to be in there and see Zion and that level of talent?
Yeah. So the best part about the job is going out and covering stuff. Like I've been lucky enough to cover the Final Four 4 or 5 times. The Bulls still don't credential me. The Bulls hate me for my coverage. They refused me a credential for many years at this point, which is bullshit, but it's not really my job to write about them. So I kind of just let it go and considered it a badge of honor. But I was lucky enough to cover the Final Four in events like the USA Junior Basketball Mini Camp, which is where I saw Zion. That's funny that's still my pin tweet. Like I should put something else up. But I loved going to that event because I probably went 3 or 4 times. They would bring the top 60 high school kids in the country, regardless of class, into Colorado Springs and the U.S. Olympic Training Facility. And basically it was just like they're rolling the ball out and you're scrimmaging for 3 days. So I remember seeing Jason Tatum there.
Mhm.
I mean, that would probably be the best player to come from that setting, but Zion, obviously, Markel Fultz. I don't have an exact number of how many pros, but I did a big feature on Mo Bamba from there when Mo Bamba was a sophomore in high school.
Yeah.
You see him and he's just got like 8-foot arms and he's shooting threes in practice and he's like 14. I'm like, this kid's incredible. Hasn't been a great NBA player, but we'll see. He's still young. He's still
high ceiling.
I was going to ask you that too. Do you have Zion? I guess is somebody that you can debate at this point if he's a bust or not. I guess it's still very early, but do you consider him a bust? And are there other players like maybe Mo Bamba where you thought they were going to be incredible right away and they weren't?
Zion's not a bust. Zion averaged 27 a game last year and like insane scoring efficiency. He just got hurt. And Michael Jordan also missed a full season with a foot injury. So did Joel Embiid, I think, missed 2. So Zion is going to be a stud as long as he stays healthy. Will he stay healthy? I can't tell you. But I think he has already proven himself to be an absolutely killer NBA player when he's been able to be on the floor. In terms of being wrong, I've been wrong so many times. I was actually, so one thing I do every year is I do the next year's draft board the day after the
right away. I know.
So I haven't done this year yet, but I got to do it like next week. I'm already getting anxiety about it because like it takes a lot of research. It's also usually like 4,000 words on players I haven't been writing on. So I got to put a lot into it. I am telling myself on this podcast that I need to start that process so I can get that published a week from Friday.
We'll hold you accountable.
It's funny, like going through that over the years, like I had Emmanuel Mudiay #1 the first year I did it. Okay. I remember seeing him at the McDonald's game.
Got long arms.
Yeah, Mudiay. Yeah. I mean, he had a lot of physical tools, but he was just never a very good NBA player. I had Cam Reddish #1. I was a big Cam Reddish guy when he was in high school. I had him above RJ Barrett and Zion. I mean, I've had plenty wrong. I remember when the Celtics made the trade down from #1 to #3.
Yeah.
I was like, fools.
Passing
like,
on Fultz.
I think everybody was, right?
Why would you want Tatum? I was a big Tatum was overrated guy, even though I had seen Tatum so much. I watched Tatum play in the Nike EYBL circuit, which is the Nike AAU league. Center court against Michael Porter Jr. And those were like the 2 top players in the country. Porter Jr. was a year younger, maybe 2 years younger, but I think 1 year. And Porter Jr. was on the same team as Trae Young. And at the time, no one would even like entertain the thought that Trae Young could be the superior prospect to Porter Jr. And I still thought Tatum sucked, even though I saw him so much. So clearly I didn't know anything back then. And I still probably don't know much now. But yeah, I mean, it's always funny to do the draft work and to like have the receipts on it because there's no getting around it, man. Like,
was there any that you were like
ranking them, publishing it for everyone to read, and sometimes it's going to look terrible, and sometimes it looks, pretty good. So
you're talking about your misses. Are there any that you were like dead right on? We were like, yeah, saw that coming. It's exactly how I pictured it, and that's exactly the player that I wrote about.
Yeah. I mean, Luka would be the obvious one.
Yeah.
I was on Luka for sure. I had him #1. From the start of that like preseason board, and I'm sure there's other ones. I'm struggling to think of them off the top of my head right now, but I've gotten some stuff right over
that was like what
I was big on Donovan Mitchell in that draft when he ended up going like 13 or 14 or something.
So I mean, obviously this is a really hard thing to do. You're projecting people, years out from when their peak's going to be. Do you get people in your mentions all the time like, oh man, you were wrong about this? And do you just shrug it off? How do you handle those people?
No, not really. I mean, I can't really remember the last time someone called me out on a bad opinion. Like it'll happen more when I'm like tweeting about a game for sure. More so than, someone digging up some old work and criticizing me for that. So yeah, I don't think that's really happened, but I'm fine with it if they do.
All right. So let's talk about the most recent game and then we'll get into the draft and we'll get into the Bulls, but the NBA finals. I saw you were just glowing on Wiggins as I was of just like how dominant he was that last game. He was just everywhere. You think it's going to go 7? Or you think the Warriors are going to close it out here in 6 in Boston?
I would think it would go 7, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Warriors certainly could close it out. I would bet on it going 7. These two teams just feel really evenly matched to me. And more than anything, like my main takeaway from these finals is like, if you go back a few years when it seemed like we already knew that it was going to be a Warriors versus Cavs finals. Like LeBron was running the East. I think he went to the finals 8 years in a row. The Warriors were clearly incredible from 2015 on, and then adding Durant just like basically made it totally unfair. In those days, like you could probably have restarted the playoffs 10 times and you would have gotten a Warriors versus Cavs finals every single time, right? Watching these playoffs, I just think like the league is so wide open. There's a huge opportunity for any team near the top of their conference to potentially go on and win the championship. You got to put yourself in the position to be lucky, certainly, but there's no team that I feel like, is such a juggernaut, head and shoulders above everyone else. It would not like, I would not expect the Celtics or the Warriors to make the finals next year, for instance. Now it could happen. I mean, the Celtics certainly have a good thing going, but I don't think the gap between the Celtics and the rest of the top teams in the East is that large. I've always been kind of skeptical of Boston's offense being able to, consistently produce points against a good defense. And then you watch the Warriors and it's like, Steph is just saving their ass time and time again. Wiggins has become the second best player on the team. Wiggins is incredible. Draymond is still pretty good, but he's clearly lost a step. Clay, sort of the same thing. Like, neither of those guys are worth the money they're getting paid at this point. They're just not the same as they were in their peak. But I mean, Draymond definitely made quite a few winning plays in their Game 5 victory on Monday, and Clay got hot too. So I mean, Clay can still, hit a catch and shoot 3 with the best of them. But the Warriors are by no means a powerhouse anymore. Like it really feels like they're hanging on by a thread, mostly through Steph's greatness and their ability to, pay Andrew Wiggins and have Andrew Wiggins on the team and make that move. So, I think the Warriors are going to win.
Warriors in 6,
I'm taking 7.
Okay.
But yeah, man, I look around the league and I'm like, everyone should be trying to win the title. This wasn't like back when the Bulls in 2017 had Jimmy Butler, and I think, the main reason they traded him is because they didn't want to pay him. But also, I think there was a thought of like, well, we're not going to compete against the best teams in the league.
Not close enough.
No team should have that mindset, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think your average fan would have looked at the beginning of the season being like, oh, Brooklyn. Like, no doubt Brooklyn's going to be there at the end of the year. And then, there's so many storylines that went on with that team throughout the season. So, yeah, I see where you're at. So let's transition, talk about the draft and the possibility and the upside of our team here in Chicago, the Chicago Bulls. Before we get into their 18th pick, let's just talk about prospects in general. I know to me, it feels like a little bit, everyone's looking towards next year draft, in my opinion, at that number 1 overall player as just like a generational talent, someone that's going to change a franchise. But this year we got Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren, and Paolo Banchero up at the top. I've seen and read some of your stuff. You got Jabari Smith as your number 1 overall. Why?
No, I don't. I got Jabari Smith at number 4. I got Paolo Banchero as
what?
number 1.
I listened to Cash Considerations. I thought you were talking about Jabari Smith as your favorite. No.
Oh no! I'm on the record, Paolo, from the very start. Of the
okay.
Number 1, but I do think Jabari is going to go number 1. So maybe that's what I said on the podcast.
Okay.
What is that about? Because he to me came out of nowhere, and I'll admit I'm a little bit more of a casual fan than maybe Dan is, but at the beginning of this season it was Holmgren and it was Banchero, right? And then Jabari emerged throughout the course of the season. Is that
sure?
accurate?
Yeah. So on my preseason board the day after the last draft, I had Paolo 1, Chet 2, and I think I had Jabari Smith 7. He was a big time prospect, but whether he was going to be number 3 or number 7, or number 10, you probably could have slotted him anywhere. Also, like all these kids had their grassroots competition wiped out by the pandemic. So that, in addition to like sort of stunting the development in some ways of them, I think it also just like limited the exposure in how many opportunities people had to view them and form opinions on them. So I wouldn't say Jabari Smith came out of nowhere. Like his dad was an NBA player, played for the Kings. I think he was taken in the 2000 draft. And he's 6'10". He's an elite shooter. He's really good. I have him as one of the 4. I have him 4th in this draft, which sounds like it's an insult, but in reality, I have him as a tier 1 prospect. I would not be surprised if he ends up being the best player in the draft. And he's just a really dynamic shooter at 6'10". Like he might already be one of the best 6'10" plus shooters in the world, which is a pretty good thing to be in 2022 NBA.
Yeah.
So
Are any of these players like franchise altering talents?
So here's how I'll frame this draft. It reminds me of the 2015 draft. I believe it was 2015. No, 2016. 2016. The top 3 picks were Ben Simmons, Brandon Ingram, and Jaylen Brown. And Ben Simmons, of course, now is a punchline, but he did make the All-Star game 3 years in a row to start his career. Jaylen Brown been pretty damn good for the Celtics on this run. He's clearly their second best player and an essential player on the team. And Ingram was sick this year.
Yeah,
Watching the
awesome.
Pelicans was so much fun. He was awesome. So like all those guys are good, right? Like I think if you take any of those guys, granted the Simmons weirdness aside, let's say, you're feeling pretty solid about that return with the top 3 pick, but they're not like mega stars. I sort of feel the same way about this draft where I really like Paolo. I do think Paolo has high upside. He's been my number 1 player the whole time. And I love Chet too. I think Chet rocks. I think anyone who doubts Chet, and everyone doubts Chet the first time they see him because he's this weird, gangly, skinny white guy who certainly cannot handle the added physicality of whatever the next level is. But Chet consistently rises to the occasion, puts up dominant stats, has crazy good tools. So
he's a great trash talker too. Love him. He's so confident and love it.
So I like the top 3 of this draft. I mean, you know, I don't know if it's going to be first team all NBA guys, but I think that they could be, you know, maybe top 20 overall guys. And yeah, we'll see how it pans out. But I would say the top 4 in this draft is really good, with Jaden Ivey, the Purdue guard, being I have him 3rd, but, you know, he would be like the last guy rounding out that top 4. Then it's kind of a crapshoot. And I think it, you know, there's a decent second tier. I would say Jalen Duren, the center from Memphis, Shaden Sharp, who I'm writing an article about. I'm publishing that this week on SBNation.com. He's basically entering the league out of high school. He was next year's number 1 recruit. Didn't play at Kentucky. He's in there. And AJ Griffin. I would say like those are the tier 2 guys. And then tier 3, like there'll be solid players in there for sure. But, you know, it's very much like it's going to depend on team context and individual development. And yeah.
Okay, so
it's a solid draft, not a spectacular draft.
So Jaden Ivey, could you talk about him a little bit? I mean, he's somebody that I'm seeing comps to Ja Morant, and that's a pretty lofty comp. I guess they worked out together last summer heading into Ivey's sophomore season. But do you see that comp at all, or could he be the next Ja Morant?
Yeah, Ja Morant's mom was a assistant coach on the Grizzlies for Morant's. So I'm sorry, Jaden Ivey's mom was an assistant on the Grizzlies for Ja Morant's freshman year. And Jaden Ivey's mom is now the head coach of Notre Dame women's basketball. She took over from Muffet McGraw. So it's cool that Jaden Ivey's like a coach's son, but the coach is his mom instead of his dad. You normally don't get that storyline. And yeah, his mom was a WNBA player, and you know, she was a big time college player too. So Ivey's awesome. I just published a huge scouting report on SBNation.com of Ivey that took me way too long and no one really read it, but I'll plug it on this podcast.
Yeah.
Google Jaden Ivey SB Nation and you'll see it. It's like 3,000 words and has a billion clips. And I guess the elevator pitch on Ivey is that he's 6'4" and he has absolutely just elite athleticism in every sense. Incredibly fast, ridiculous leaping ability, great body control. And he can just like dust the man in front of him from a dead stop, I think, with his like standstill burst and first step, or in the open floor. So you just don't see players that are that electric athletically also have really good size for a guard. In terms of Ja Morant, I don't love that comp because Morant in college led the country in assist rate. He was like assisting on 50% of his team's possessions at Murray State. And I think Ivey was like under 20%. So Ivey pretty much has played 2 guard throughout his career so far. And Morant had always played point guard. But my comparison for him, my like best case comparison would be like a taller Donovan Mitchell, probably. Which would be a hell of a player and someone that should be number 1 overall in the draft.
Right.
That's kind of what I think his best case scenario is. He's not a perfect player, But also, like, Purdue was always mucking up the paint with, big men who couldn't shoot too. They had Zach Edey and Trevion Williams there, who were both
They always
awesome players. but
enormous centers. Yeah.
yeah. Uh,
I
so
like Ivy though.
Yeah, Ivy rocks. We'll see if the Kings take him. Number 4. I wrote that if they pass on him, they're fools. But or
Sounds
him
like
and
something Kings would do.
Yeah, would you
Absolutely.
be surprised about that? Because they just traded Halliburton? If they
Yeah, I
took
don't
a
think
guard?
he fits that well there, right? Like him and De'Aaron Fox, like not a great fit. They're so similar. I think Ivy definitely has higher upside. Fox, his shooting totally fell off last year. I think like the shine on him started to come off a bit.
Mhm.
Obviously, he's still very talented and he's still
Mhm.
young, so he could still be a good player. But I thought that was a bad trade for the Kings when they traded Halliburton for Sabonis, and now it just seems like the fact that they might not take the obviously best player, Ivy, because he's too redundant with Fox, who's already disappointing 5 years into his career. Seems like classic Kings, and the safest bet is that they're going to screw it up. But we'll see.
Yeah, that's
knows?
usually a good bet with the Kings. Yeah. Let's bring it to the Bulls draft. Possibly we'll see. There's been a lot of chatter, NBA Twitter has been a buzz of like trade rumors, and a good NBA Finals NBA trade is always fun to kind of take a storyline and add it in there. We saw a lot of smoke with Gobert becoming available, giving up a lot from the Bulls. It sounds like they want a number 1. They want Pat Williams. They want maybe 2 other guys, a Kobe White and another guy as well. Is there anything that you're buying in there? Are you wanting the Bulls to make a move for Gobert? Do you want them to stand pat and see what they have in Pat Williams, who is about the same age as a lot of these prospects in this draft?
I'm going to ask you guys what you think, because I'm so into it. I've talked about it so many times. What do you think? Would you do Vooch and Pat Williams for Gobert?
I know Evan's going to say yes.
Yeah, I would,
yeah.
because I want a rim protector for sure. And I think Gobert is the epitome of that. I think you're shaking it up. I'm also kind of out on Pat Williams. I just told you I'm a little bit more of a casual fan than Dan is. I feel like I've seen enough. He's definitely still young, and there's definitely still a lot of potential there. But also, that's what you're able to trade. If you do it before the potential is realized,
yeah,
then you're not going to get anything for him.
Yeah.
But I that's just my opinion.
And man, the more I think about it as well, I have always been the Bulls fan of like, oh, we got to grow our talent. We got to see what we got here. Let's hold. I've always bought into the talent, and looking around the NBA landscape, and a lot of the winning franchises make a lot of changes all of the time. They're constantly roster turning over. They're constantly trying to improve. So I would be for it because we've always been kind of a franchise that we either hold on to our players too long and then we don't get a value for them in our trade, or we overvalue our players to where we don't make a move to try to improve it. And it would just be wild to me to think about a team with Gobert, Lonzo, Caruso, Zach, and DeMar. Sounds like a pretty awesome lineup. And I'm just here for the chaos right now. I want the Bulls to not be a first round out. I just want to see what happens if we add Gobert to it, who has been a perennial defensive player of the year, a rim protector, which we obviously lack. You know that Vooch isn't a Chicago player. The fans don't like the soft interior play. And we get Gobert in there, somebody that's just going to be able to swipe blocks and just take away points, albeit he cannot play offense. He is a strictly kind of a pick and roll player. I'm for it. I don't know. I'm for it. I'm talking myself into it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence myself. Gobert's awesome, to be sure. I guess the positives of it is like Utah annually fails in the postseason as much because of the defenders in front of Gobert as Gobert himself. And sort of like the book is just sort of out on Utah. They have such weak perimeter defenders. Teams play 5 out against them, spread them out, and it's just buckets into the lane all day. But Gobert's never played with anyone as talented as Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso in terms of perimeter defense.
Yeah.
And so those 3, you would think the Bulls would have a top 5 defense if they could all stay healthy, which obviously is a major question mark for Lonzo and Caruso. So I like that. Offensively, though, I'm like, okay, the Bulls were just 29th in 3-point rate. That's like the percentage of shots they take from 3-point range. And Vooch like took a ton of threes. He took some of the most, he had to be among the team leaders in 3-point attempts on the season. So now you're trading another shooter or potential shooter. The shot didn't go in very often. It was 31% from three. And that was the main reason why I think that Vooch's play bottomed out this year. But you're trading him for a guy who's going to clog the paint and who's only going to catch lobs, basically, and who has consistently shown in the playoffs that Gobert cannot punish smaller lineups when teams like put a wing on him. Like that's really Gobert's biggest problem is when teams like put a wing on him and on offense, they space out to the 3-point range and put Gobert on an island or, put Gobert in the corner guarding a corner shooter. And, then he can't get to the rim. But, Gobert's got to punish those smaller matchups on offense. And he just doesn't do that. Now, is that because Donovan Mitchell hates him because Rudy Gobert started COVID and he won't give him the ball? Possible. But I don't know. So, and then I also think like DeRozan, he's not really a malleable star. Like I love DeRozan. DeRozan's a king. I think everything about him's an A+. But like I would say LaVine is a malleable star because of his shooting ability, but DeRozan isn't because he can't shoot. So when you got DeRozan, like he's going to take such a huge percentage of his shots from mid-range. You got to clear out the mid-range for him so he can go to work. And that was, a big part of his success last year. So I wonder, like, the half-court offense already wasn't that good with Vooch. And now, like, is it going to be better with DeRozan? Or would it be better, with Gobert? I find that hard to believe that the offense would be better. I think the offense would probably be worse, but the defense should be significantly better. So I guess that's the argument. In terms of Pat, I got a million Pat thoughts. I guess the best way to put it is like the way Billy Donovan wants to use him is kind of the way the Suns use Mikal Bridges, which is mostly as like a catch and shoot 3-and-D wing who's going to space the floor around DeRozan's mid-range.
That's not Pat.
And I just feel like that's sort of the weakest part of Pat's game. Like he's just not a very confident shooter. He's like a pretty accurate shooter, but his shot is so slow and he needs so much time to get it off. And he's just constantly in his own head. He's just like not a next play player. I don't know if you guys play pickup, but I feel the same way in pickup. Like if I miss 2-3 shots in a row in pickup, I'm not taking an open shot. Even if
I'm launching
out of it. So Pat, you gotta get over that. You gotta launch it.
Yep.
And yeah, I don't know. Like, but I think Pat's pretty good on the ball. That's sort of where his secret upside is. But the Bulls don't really play him on the ball, and he hasn't really gotten many opportunities. Granted, he played 5 games last year because Mitchell Robinson took him out on a dirty play in the 5th game of the year. But I guess like it would probably make the Bulls better next year. So like you probably do it, I guess. Yeah. I'm not like totally gung-ho about it. Like I still don't know if they'd be at a championship level. But granted, like as I said, you just got to put yourself in position to get lucky, and maybe that trade would do that. So I could definitely talk myself into it. I don't have like a super strong opinion on it one way or another. I guess people expect strong opinions from me, but I don't got it. I'm losing my juice, I guess, in my own way. If they do it, it's fine. If they don't do it, I think it's also fine. I think that the Vooch hate is a little bit over, like he gets too much hate that he doesn't deserve. He's not like a perfect player, obviously, and he had a pretty disappointing year, but he had a big role on the team. Like there was no other big.
I mean, he was the best player in the playoffs too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. There's no other big man on the entire team. So like he had to do a lot of the screening. He had to do a lot of the playmaking in terms of like a center. Like he has good hands. He can like read a defense as a passer. He had to do a ton of the rebounding. And then like in terms of his defense, I would say like there's a couple different types of defenders for a center. There's a center who just like keeps everything in front of him and can like play his little part and do his little job, and that's fine. And that's what Vooch does. I think he can generally execute his assignment. But then there's the guys who like clean up other people's mistakes. And when you got Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, who are not good defensive players, maybe you need a center who can clean up people's mistakes. Vooch cannot do that. He can't jump. He can't really run backwards. He's like, he can position himself usually, but he's just like slow and can't jump. So, that's not going to change when he's like 30 or whatever he is now. So, I don't know. I can see it either way. I would love to see the Bulls make a bold move this summer, to be sure. Is it the Vooch move, or is it the Vooch for Gobert thing? Maybe. Yeah. Like if they could do it if they could get, Gobert for Kobe and Vooch, I would do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, but why would Utah?
Why would Utah?
Yeah,
I
that's the
don't-
problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to a lot of moves as well, especially a team that's stood pat at the All-Star break and didn't add any
Totally.
other players. When you get into this realm of like entering playoff caliber team rosters every single year, you're trying to like one up your opposition and how can you get better and how can you ultimately build that championship team. Sometimes it's through the draft. I mean, the Bulls hold the 18th pick here coming up in what, 9 days, I think the draft is. Is there a player? I have a list here of some players that I like for them, but is there a player that you are hoping falls to 18 for them?
Yeah, I guess it would be sick if they could trade it. Can you trade 18 and Kobe to get some veteran help? Front court guy, 4-5 combo. Who could give you a different dimension? Like that would be awesome.
You got
Or,
any
like,
names
trade it-
for that?
Yeah, I should, but I don't really know. Like Kyle Kuzma? Could we get Kyle Kuzma?
Kuzma's sick,
Or-
man. I'm a big fan of him.
Okay.
He excelled out there in Washington. I want a player that's like in the same cut for cloth of like a PJ Tucker, somebody who's like a big bully who could also knock down a corner three and just kind of sets the tone. But obviously, I would want someone younger than a PJ Tucker for the 18th pick on a Kobe. But I want somebody like in that mold on
So
this
you want a
team.
goon? You think they need
Yes.
a goon?
I think they do.
Well-
I look at the finals. You have Draymond on one side, you got Marcus Smart on the other. I think
Grant Williams.
winning teams have goons. It's just a role that a player has to play, and the Bulls don't have any. The Bulls are nice guys.
Yeah, who's the Bulls' biggest goon? It would be Tristan Thompson, but he's just a piece of shit who sucks. Doesn't really count.
Exactly.
We
You'd
can
say
find-
Caruso, right? Because he mucks
Yeah,
it
it's
up,
Caruso.
but he's not.
Caruso's the
yeah.
biggest goon for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely the biggest goon. But I guess like that guy in this draft, there's a couple I like. So probably the one people would know is EJ Liddell, who played
That's
3
my
years
guy.
at Ohio State. He's a local guy from Belleville, Illinois.
Mhm.
It's been on the map forever. He wasn't a McDonald's All-American, but he was like close to one. He was like a top 30 or 40 recruit. Got better every year. I think that taking him would be sort of similar to the thought process behind Io last year. Io was a star in the Big Ten who made a nice transition into an NBA role player. Liddell could potentially do the same thing. 6'7", 240, strong as fuck, jumps out of the gym, really is a shot blocker. My question with him is like, is he good enough on offense to be an NBA player? I'm talking about from back when he was in high school. Even I was wondering this.
Mhm.
And he just got better with his jump shot every year at Ohio State. He hit 37% from three this year. I'm not really projecting him as a high volume shooter. Like, could he become as good of a shooter as Grant Williams has? Can he be the next Grant Williams? Because, both sort of
He's
similar
sick.
size.
Yeah.
Both strong as hell. Both guys really developed their shooting after getting into college. Grant Williams, 2-time SEC player of the year. I don't know if Liddell was Big Ten player of the year, but he was very, very good. He was a superstar at the college level. So I think like that could be a good pick for them. I don't know how high his upside is because I'm skeptical of his offense a little bit, but he could be a goon for sure. I mean, he's strong as hell and he's pretty good. If they took him, I would be happy. I think that would be a good pick for sure.
Yeah.
Are
And I
they
think in
just
that-
looking? Are they just
Go.
looking for a certain thing, like Dan's talking about, like a goon, or they're looking for maybe a backup for Lonzo or something like that? Or are they just taking the best player available at 18?
So what do the Bulls need this offseason? I would say they need size and shooting. They were too damn small in the playoffs last year. Them going against the Bucks was like the worst matchup ever because the Bucks are like, here's 3 7-footers. We're just gonna pound you the entire time.
Yeah, it's just
Uh,
Giannis bullying everybody.
It
Yeah.
sucked.
And even just that series was brutal. But they were too small. They got to get bigger this year, no doubt. And they don't take enough threes. And part of that is because DeRozan's the best player on the team, and DeRozan has a mid-range heavy attack. But then everyone else has got to be letting him rip. And you can't be like, you just run into a math problem if you're 29th in the league in 3-point rate like they were this past year. So they need size and shoot. Granted, every team in the league is probably like, we need size.
Same
and
thing.
shooting. Like every team wants to be big in basketball, and every team in this era wants to shoot it. So yeah, I think like that's what they should target. That combination is tough to find, but that's what I would say at least.
Yeah. My favorite guy is EJ Liddell, but I'm also intrigued and I feel like it's something that AK might go for with a history of drafting Michael Porter Jr. or being a part of that decision, at least in Denver, is Patrick Baldwin Jr., somebody who was very highly sought at as a high school prospect, goes to UWM to play for his dad, gets his dad fired, plays like shit, ruins his draft capital pretty much. So he's going to fall. But again, that is, Michael Porter was like the number one recruit out of high school. And then he had this back issue. So people were afraid of him. The Bulls were afraid of him when I was cursing him out for not drafting him. And I feel like this is kind of a thing that AK might fall for, is like, this guy was a former top recruit, bad situation at UWM, shot the ball like shit, played like shit, got his dad fired. But hey, he potentially could be, I mean, he's a bigger guy. He could shoot the ball. He's highly skilled. What do you think about Patrick Baldwin Jr.?
Well, I did a big feature on Patrick Baldwin Jr. He was the dude I profiled last week. I usually do a couple big draft profiles each year, and this year I did Patrick Baldwin Jr. So that's up at SBNation.com. You can find it if you Google his name or just look for it on the homepage. It should be there. Talked to him before the season. I think like after the second or third game of the year, I like called him up and I did an interview with him, but they had just lost to someone really bad. It was like Eastern Kentucky or something. I'm like, oh, this isn't good. Maybe I should sit on this story. And then like 2 days later, he got hurt and only played 11 games for the season. He was someone who was, a top 5 recruit at the end of his high school career, but he dislocated his ankle in the second game of his senior year, missed the entire year. And to me, it seems like he just tried to push himself a little bit too much. Like he was playing USA basketball on the U19 team that won a gold medal. And then, he just made this ridiculous decision to play for his dad at Milwaukee instead of going to Duke when he would have been a starter at Duke on Coach K's last ever team. So the year was just a disaster for him. The ankle never healed. He was just in a really bad situation, I think, physically and team context wise. Like that team was horrible. No one could dribble. No one could shoot. It was just a trash team where even when you add a guy who's a top 5 recruit in the country, like he just wasn't set up to succeed and he couldn't stay healthy. So he only played 11 games. The weird thing is that he shot 26% from 3, which is like, he has had a reputation as a knockdown shooter from early in his high school career. Like when I did the profile on him, like he was being called the top prospect in Illinois when his dad was an assistant at Northwestern when he was in 8th grade. They were saying like, this is the best long-term prospect in the state. And by the time he was a sophomore in high school, he was number 1 in that class. And I think he fell down to like number 5. Chet passed him, Banchero passed him, but he was number 1 briefly. I guess, the health is going to be the swing factor. I think he's going to shoot it. Like, I'm not that worried about that.
Yeah.
The thing to note with him is he's extremely unathletic, and that might be because of the injury.
His ankle.
But at the combine, he had the 4th lowest vertical leap in the history of the combine. It was like 26.5 inches was his max vertical. One of the only players to ever jump worse than Patrick Baldwin at the combine, one of the 3, Nikola Vucevic, who jumped like 25 inches at the combine and obviously had a great career. Like he did not need to be able to jump to become an all-star. So
he's also 7 feet tall.
He's 7 feet tall. Well, Patrick Baldwin Jr. 6'10.5". So he's fucking huge, which is his calling card. He's gigantic and he can really shoot it. So I like him. I mean, I'm a little biased maybe because I just did the story, but to me, like for the Bulls, he makes a lot of sense because they need size and shooting, and he's huge and he can shoot it. Maybe that's too simplistic of thinking. I do think ultimately, like, he's a pretty risky pick because he just put up terrible numbers in like a really bad conference, and he's been hurt for 2 years and can't seem to get healthy. And like, I talked to him at the combine, he's like, yeah, I'm healthy. But, like he was like almost like he was sort of using it as an excuse for the poor athletic testing too. He didn't really want to make it an excuse, but like he was sort of insinuating that like, I'm not 100%, but I'm not going to make excuses, but I'm trying to get healthy. And I'm close to getting healthy. So I feel like a team with multiple picks should take him. Like the Grizzlies got multiple picks, the Spurs got multiple picks. Like I would definitely take him in that sense. Yeah, like the Bulls could take him. I'd be happy with it for sure. Like I've mocked Patrick Baldwin Jr. to the Bulls multiple times throughout the year. I got another mock draft coming tomorrow, and I don't have that this time, but I think I did in my last 2.
All right, who do you got? You got spoilers.
So my mock draft tomorrow, which was a really stupid idea because
where can people find that at?
SBNation.com. You can find all my stuff at SBNation.com. Yeah. So my idea for tomorrow, which is dumb, was one mock draft of what is most likely to happen or how I think the draft is going to go. And then the other side of it is what I would do with
Yeah,
every
that's what
pick.
I want to hear.
People
I want to know
really
what.
care about what a 5'6", 35-year-old guy
What do we got?
to play the game.
5'6".
thinks
Those are
about
good measurables.
So like, for example, like on one of them, like Jabari Smith is going to go number 1, Chet's going to go number 2, Paolo's going to go number 3, and then like it gets interesting at 4. At least that's what it seems like it's going to happen. But like in mine, like I wrote the thing. I've done multiple things on this. Like Paolo, I think is the best prospect, and I wrote that the Magic should take him. So on the other one, I got Paolo 1, Chet 2, Jabari 3, whatever. So for the Bulls, I got Tari Eason in one of them, who is awesome, and I got Liddell in the other one, just depending on how it goes. Because like I think Eason should be probably like a top 10 or 12 pick, but it doesn't seem like the NBA likes him that much for some pretty obvious reasons. But like, he could still be there for the Bulls. The Bulls could pass on him potentially, I think. So we'll see. I think that they'll definitely have to consider him. But that's what I got tomorrow in the mock draft.
The quick research I did on Tari Eason was just watching some of his highlights. Yes, he's 6'8". Yes, he's like a crazy athlete. But the thing I like the most about him is how fast he shoots the ball. Like he's got such a quick release for a 6'8" forward, and just like blindly shoots it, which could be like at his detriment, but also could be a positive. That guy gets the ball and it's out of his hand in like no time. And I was like, that is, as opposed to like a EJ Liddell or these other guys who kind of have like a little hitch, almost like a Tatum where they like crank it up and then shoot it. This guy was popping it quick. So I like him.
Funny because I always say that he has a slow release, but
you think
maybe
he's got
I
a
don't know
slow
what
one?
I'm talking about.
Okay.
I kind of think he does. I kind of think that, he hit a decent percentage of his shots. He hit 35%, but it was on low volume. He hit 80% of his free throws, and
improved everything from freshman to sophomore. Like he just got exponentially better after his freshman year.
Yeah. To me, he's not a safe bet to shoot it in the NBA. And I think that's part of why he's falling. That's just my opinion. I could be totally wrong.
Of course.
So, I guess like the thing with Tari is he just has great tools. And I tweeted this last night about Wiggins. It's like Wiggins just has like the best tools ever. And that's why he was the number 1 overall pick. And actually my first ever high school recruiting story for SB Nation was about Andrew Wiggins at the McDonald's All-American game in 2013. He was the number 1 recruit in the class at the time. Like no one knew where he was going to go to school. Of course, he ended up playing with Embiid, who became a way better player. But like Wiggins was recognized as the guy at that time so early because his tools are just ridiculous. He's 6'8". He jumps out of the damn gym, super agile, 7-foot wingspan, some shot making touch. And then he goes to Minnesota and he was, underwhelming, disappointing, like basically in a role where he was supposed to be Kobe, I guess. Like he was like the go-to scorer every time down. And like Wiggins just wasn't a good enough like processor and passer or like a great enough shooter to be good in that role. But now everyone loves Wiggins, and Wiggins is killing it on the Warriors. He's been their second best player in a different role where he can just focus on being a wing stopper and a secondary scorer. And it's like, okay, so he wasn't good enough to be a star of a team, but he's like way overqualified in terms of his talent level to just be like a role player. You know what I mean? And that's why he's so damn good. Because, even like someone like Mikal Bridges, I'm thinking like Mikal Bridges is an awesome wing defender. Everyone loves Mikal Bridges. He's a little longer than Wiggins. He's probably as big or bigger than him. But like, I mean,
it's like half the athlete of
athletically, it's just like not even fucking close. Like Wiggins is just so goddamn fast. He can jump out of the gym so quick. And he's been awesome. I mean, Wiggins legitimately defended Luka Doncic as well as you can, and now he's defending Jason Tatum about as well as you can. So, anyways, that's
while also getting like 15 boards, right?
Saying Wiggins is good because he has tools, and even though he sucked or didn't suck, he was disappointing in a primary offensive option role. The tools still gave him a chance to it gave him outs to figure out what he could eventually be good at. Maybe that just means playing with Steph Curry. He seems to make life easier for everyone. But that's why I like Tari Eason. He just has great physical tools. He has hands as big as Kawhi Leonard. He's got a 7'2" wingspan. He is very fast, great leaper.
Quick shot.
And he just rips the ball out of people's hands. He just says, this is my ball. I'm taking this ball. And then runs down the other court and dunks the shit out of it. But he can't go left at all. At all. He is him and Ivy both are like the two most dominant hand prospects you'll see really enter the draft. Like both those guys got no left hand. Can you develop a left hand? I don't know. Ask someone smarter than me. I would
A
think
little
like,
late. A little
I was
late.
like, are you asking us? I don't think so.
I would say it's a little late in the game. If you're going to the NBA, you don't have a left to develop.
I've tried. I'm not very good at it still.
Yeah,
so.
I don't know. I mean, you should probably be able to. You certainly can't learn to run as fast or jump as high as Tari Eason, but maybe you can learn to dribble with your left hand or shoot with your left hand, finish with it. So that's kind of the sales pitch for him. You know who he could be like?
Crazy athletic LSU prospects, though, is like Tyrus Thomas. My head just flashes to it.
Well, I'm going to go with another Bulls draft pick who I think he could be like, who I liked back in the day, but James Johnson.
Yeah, big game James.
Was viewed as a bust, right? Because he never really did much with the Bulls. My one James Johnson memory is just young LeBron. This is probably 2010, just fucking dropping the hammer on James Johnson. An epic dunk. Like young LeBron, YouTube.
He's like still in the league though, right? He's like a very serviceable role player. Yeah, he's been around forever.
Still in the league. How many guys from the 09 draft are still in the league?
Yeah,
he's still there. But yeah, I mean,
great fantasy pickup too. Once in a while when you meet somebody.
Sure, checks a lot of gets a lot of blocks and steals and doesn't miss many shots. And Eason. The other thing with him is he made the most free throws this year. Like he just shot a ton of them because he's so fast. No one could really stay in front of him. And well, unless you're sitting on his right hand, because you really only go right. But he just gets to the line based off his physicality, really. So that could be another avenue for him to be a good player. I love it.
All right. Well, according to Ricky O'Donnell, the Bulls are going to draft either EJ Liddell or Tari Eason. We'll see if that happens. Ricky, thanks so much for being here. Again, he's Ricky O'Donnell. He's a basketball writer and editor at SB Nation. He's also the co-host of Cash Considerations podcast, a Chicago Bulls podcast. You can find him on Twitter at SBN_Ricky. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Thanks, Ricky.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Thanks again to our guest, Ricky O'Donnell. Again, you can find him on Twitter at SBN_Ricky. All right, Dan, you heard it from Ricky. That's who we're looking for.
EJ Liddell or Tari Eason. Yeah. I'll be happy with both those.
Yeah. You got a would you rather for us?
I do, real quick with it. Summer is here. Would you rather hot day, it's like 100 degrees in Chicago, have an ice cream sandwich or a firecracker popsicle?
I think I'm going firecracker popsicle.
Why?
I think that's more refreshing. When it's 100 degrees outside, you want the popsicle 100%. I think that the ice cream sandwich isn't going to do it for me. What about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. Popsicle. It's a mess too, right? If it's 100 and you whip out that ice cream sandwich, it's half on your hand, half all in your face. Yeah, exactly. It's not a good sight.
Yeah.
Firecracker popsicle all day.
For sure. It's a lot cleaner.
What about a fast fact? You got one?
All right, I do have one. It's a quick one about the NBA draft, since we've been talking draft. How many picks are in the NBA draft this year?
I don't know, 60?
There are only 58 picks this year instead of the traditional 60. Chicago and Miami both forfeited second-round picks due to a violation of league rules governing the timing of free agency discussion.
That's such bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah. That's this year. There's
every single team talks to players before free agency, and then like Shams and Woj just dropping bombs like an hour before it opens that everyone's going to sign. That sucks. But yeah. 60, originally 58. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the Bulls lost a pick this year.
Yeah.
But we do have the 18th pick. So there you go. That has been our show. Thanks again to our guest, Ricky O'Donnell, for joining us today. For Dan Slowick, I'm Evan Bierman. You've been listening to the Domestic Draft Podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to rate the show. You can find us on Twitter at Domestic Draft, on Instagram at Domestic Draft Podcast. Our website is domesticdraft.com, and you can watch the show on YouTube. Just search up Domestic Draft and drop us a sub. Thanks again for listening.
Cheers.
Cheers.